Jackson Gatlin from the Locked On Rockets podcast. Always nice to talk to you about this team. We haven't really visited for a while, but hey, it's draft week, and this team is front and center. 3 picks in the first round. Let's start with number 3. Hey, the number one question for any draft week: who are they taking? Where do you think the Rockets go? I have a feeling you're going to go one particular direction, but I want to hear your take.
Yeah, no, I think right now all signs, Daniel, are pointing towards the guy, Paolo Banchero. He's probably going to be the guy who's available at pick number 3 for the Houston Rockets. Now, I will say that as we are just a few days out of the NBA draft, there is some rumblings about the fact that Orlando may not be completely locked in on Jabari at number 1, that OKC might be really interested in Paolo Banchero or potentially even Jaden Ivey at number 2. Is this just posturing from those other 2 organizations, maybe trying to trade down a little bit, extract a little bit of value from a team like the Houston Rockets or like the Sacramento Kings and kind of convince one of those 2 teams to maybe trade up a little bit? That could be the case, but right now I feel very confident in saying that by the end of Thursday evening, Paolo Banchero will be a Houston Rocket at pick number 3.
So what do you think of that?
I think Paolo Banchero is a really interesting prospect. And to be completely transparent with you, Daniel, earlier on in the pre-draft process, I was actually a little bit kind of down on Paolo Banchero as a player, because I looked at him and I thought, man, like, what if he's just one of those kind of like inefficient bigs? Like, he never really gets the outside shot going and he's got to have the ball in his hands to be effective. But I really started looking at him as a playmaker, somebody who can be kind of the focal point for an offense. You put the ball in his hands, he creates at a high level for himself and for his teammates. And then kind of extending that benefit of the doubt to him where he's got the basketball IQ to be a good creator with the basketball in his hands. And I think that will be able to extend to his game elsewhere, as like he can be a good screen setter and then kind of operate out of the middle of the floor, kind of coming out of the pick and roll. If you put him in the pick and roll with a guy like Jalen Green or Kevin Porter Jr. and have him kind of run some 2-man game like that, I think he can be a really potent force offensively. And there are some question marks about the outside shot, whether or not it's going to translate at the NBA level. 34% in college, not the best number, not an absolute catastrophe either. And then defensively, maybe leaves a little bit of something to be desired, but he has all the tools and all the makings to be a high caliber player on that end of the floor if he chooses to. And during some of his pre-draft interviews and whatnot, he's basically said, look, I understand, I've dropped the ball a little bit defensively. Maybe I was a little bit too exhausted from, shouldering too much of a load offensively. At least he's aware of the problem and knows what he needs to fix. And I think that's really important.
I think the Rockets, it's all about fit, right? Too. I think he can be a guy that you can grow with some of these other young, talented players that the Rockets have, don't you think?
I think you got to evaluate fit a little bit, but at the end of the day, it should be, especially at the top of the draft, it should be about who you think is the best actual talent at the top of the draft. I think as you get a little bit later in the draft, pick 17, 26, which I'm sure we're going to discuss here in a moment, then you maybe start factoring in a little bit like, okay, what are the team needs? What are maybe some positional needs? If you can draft a little bit more for some depth somewhere else on the floor or target a specific skill set. But at the top of the draft, I think you got to go with whoever the best prospect is. And thankfully for the Rockets, they're in the position where the decision is largely kind of made for them, right? Whoever goes at 1 and 2, there are kind of 3 more or less consensus top prospects with the 3 big men at the top of this draft. And the Rockets are just going to get whoever's left, which at this point, I really do think it's going to be Paolo Banchero.
Do you think they keep the 3rd pick? I know there's always posturing. I know this, these organizations are always like, well, we're not sure if we're going to make the pick. Draft night, things change. They've got 3 in the first round. I tend to think they're going to keep this one. And if they're going to move anything, it's going to be either 17 or 26, I would think.
Yeah, I'm absolutely inclined to agree with you. I have zero doubts in my mind that they would explore the idea of trading that 3rd overall pick. There are some rumblings that they might be trying to potentially trade up to either the 2nd pick or the 1st overall pick. Again, whether or not there's a whole bunch of truth to those rumors, or again, maybe it's just some organizational posturing. When the draft lottery happened and we knew Houston secured a top 3 pick, it was basically a foregone conclusion in my mind at that point that they were going to make a selection. Had they landed at 4 or 5, I think it would have been a lot more murky as to whether or not they were actually going to make the selection at 4 or 5, because again, you start getting away from the consensus top talents in the draft, maybe question marks about how do you factor in a guy like Jaden Ivey if you were to draft him at 4 or 5? But thankfully, the Rockets aren't in that position. It's the decision's largely made for them. They're going to get a top tier 1 prospect. And that's, again, to pair somebody like that with a Jalen Green that you've already got from last year's draft, it's going to be an incredible way to jumpstart this rebuild.
you're splitting hairs. I'm going to ask this question by splitting some hairs. Is there one of those guys that if the Rockets do take him, we're leaning on Banchero, obviously, but if there's one of those guys that you'd be kind of like, oh no, I wish they had gone. For me, it's Holmgren. I think the Rockets should probably stay away from Holmgren. I think he's going to go either one or two. That's fine, but I just think his physical nature. I mean, I think he's got a long way to go in the physical aspect of the game. Very talented guy, as we saw at Gonzaga. But I think that would be the player if the Rockets pick him. Like, I wish they would have gone somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Honestly, I have the most reservations about Chet Holmgren, just from again, you look at him, you look at the physical nature of where the NBA is at. I mean, the guy weighs 195 pounds right now. Like, he needs to add some serious muscle to be able to reach his true potential as an NBA big. And with his frame, with his current size, like, how much more muscle can you realistically expect for him to add? Is it 15 pounds? Is it 20? Is it 25? I will throw out this comparison. Giannis Antetokounmpo managed to add 50 pounds of muscle from where he was at his rookie year when he was drafted to where he is at right now. Now, Giannis is called the Greek Freak for a reason. Maybe Chet Holmgren is the next freak of nature that's able to do that and add 40 or 50 pounds of muscle to his frame, and he becomes one of the next all-time greats. But right now, I don't necessarily see that. At least I'm not super confident in that happening. So I'm right there with you. I am a little hesitant about Chet Holmgren. I do think that any one of these top three guys is an absolute slam dunk, though. When you look at Jabari, Chet, and Paolo, they've each got their strengths. They've each got their weaknesses. And to me, even though Jabari is favored to go number one, I really don't necessarily know if there is a clear-cut favorite for number one in this draft, just because, again, each guy brings a certain skill set to the table. And this is one of those few years where there isn't that, like, locked-in consensus number one guy.
All right, so 17 and 26, we talked about some of the flexibility they do have with possibly moving out of those picks, and you talked about fit in these selections. Where should the Rockets go? Let's say they do keep the picks. Where do you think they should go? What needs do they need to fill in those two spots?
Well, I think you look at the way the Rockets drafted last year, right? They picked up two guards in Jalen Green and Josh Christopher. They've still got the Kevin Porter Jr. experiment going on strong. Then they also picked up Alperen Sengun and Usman Garuba. Alperen Sengun, his future is a lot more clear now with the departure of Christian Wood. So Alp's the future five for this Rockets team. Hopefully Usman Garuba gets some more run this next season. They need some wing help. They need some length and some size on the wings. Daniel, this is a Rockets team that has been so small for so long, especially these past couple seasons, trotting out Christian Wood at the five, who is, a bit smaller on the scale of fives, just across the NBA. And then for the entirety of this past season, having Jayshawn Tate at 6'4" be your power forward. I'm ready to see this Rockets team bring some size into the mix. And so one of my favorite picks for the Rockets, and I hope he's there at 17 when they make that selection, if they make that selection, is Tari Eason from LSU. He's a guy who's got great size, great defensive versatility. We throw around that term defends 1 through 5 quite a bit when we talk about high caliber defenders in the NBA. This is a guy who can very legitimately guard 1 through 5. And not only that, he's a pretty strong offensive player as well. He can be a terror in transition when he gets going downhill. And he's shooting about 37% from the three-point line. There are some concerns about his game. Maybe he plays a little bit reckless at times reckless at times on both sides of the basketball, can get into a little bit of early foul trouble, and then offensively can be a little bit tunnel visioned at times. But the effort, the intensity, the hustle, the grit is all there. And then for a guy who gives you all that defensive versatility to also be a 37% three-point shooter on the other end of the floor, that is going to be a top-tier role player at the NBA level.
For you, how exciting is it to just watch the team grow, especially at this time of year, bringing in new faces? Last year, we saw really, especially towards the end of the year, some of these guys really step up, kind of really live up to some of that young potential that they had. Yes, there was still room to grow, and they still made mistakes. We all get that. But boy, the flashes were there of how exciting this team could be. Just for you, how exciting is it to see this team build through this process now at the draft? And the next couple of years could be pretty exciting given what's going on with Brooklyn. They can have some assets here that are pretty high.
Absolutely, no doubt. Look, I think a big part of what makes sports so inherently special is you have to appreciate the journey, right? Where it's cool to be able to be competing in the playoffs and to be vying for championships year in year out, that kind of thing. But being able to appreciate the journey that it takes to get to that point, right? To have the highs and the lows as a sports fan, to see this team hopefully grow something really special from the ground up, right? This all kind of started in that moment where they kept their pick last year, and then they were able to select Jalen Green second overall. That's where you really started to see the domino effect of, okay, this is potentially the beginnings of the Rockets laying the foundation for what is going to hopefully be a very competitive, very highly entertaining team for a long, long time. And so to me, especially these past couple of years, seeing just the influx of young talent after the Rockets being one of the oldest, if not, I do believe at one time, the oldest team in the association for a little while.
One of the oldest teams, yeah.
Yeah, you get this influx of young talent, and there's absolutely growing pains with that, right? You see rookie mistakes left and right. You see Steven Silas maybe, getting a little bit of gray hair sooner than he would have liked because of some of the mistakes being made on the floor. But it's the learning, it's the growth, it's seeing these guys, they're making mistakes earlier in the season. And then you see them grow, and suddenly you're like, oh, I remember when Jalen Green usually would forget to do X, Y, Z offensively, or he would, struggle to guard this type of matchup defensively. And then you watch as he progresses through the season, and you're like, he's making strides. He's growing as a player. And then you have a payoff like we got at the end of the season where we saw Jalen Green go for 30 plus in 6 of his final 7 games. And that's where you can really look at it and be like, they're building something special here and working towards something absolutely phenomenal.
And finally, I asked you that question before asking you about 26. Now, obviously, it depends on what they do with 17, how that goes. I know there's, again, the rumors around Eric Gordon, whether or not they're going to move him, if they package some kind of deal with him. Anything is possible, I think, once you get to 26. But is there another player, not maybe specifically at 26, was there another player that really kind of stands out to you in this draft that you think can really fit the Rockets picture?
Yeah, actually. So another guy that I'm really, really high on, and I think he has a lot of potential as an NBA player, is actually from the G League Ignite. His name's Marjon Beauchamp. He's another guy who has all the makings to be kind of a defensive ace at the NBA level. I would kind of compare him to Philadelphia's Matisse Thybulle, if you will, a guy that has the ability to be an absolute dog defensively, a great lockdown one-on-one perimeter defender, all the physical gifts to make somebody's life a living hell on that end of the basketball floor. And then offensively, he's capable with the basketball in his hands. He can put the ball on the floor. He's got a competent dribble. He's actually got some pretty underrated court vision, I think, as a playmaker. The biggest drawback on his game is the fact that his three-point shot is not great. He shot just, I believe, I'm going off my head here, but 24%, I think, in the G League, which is not a great number. But when you look at him actually shooting, there's nothing mechanically wrong with his shot. It's a good form. It's a good shooting stroke. And he was a decent three-point shooter back in high school, and he was a decent shooter from the free throw line. So maybe it's just something that just didn't quite translate at the G League level. I think it is something that he can work on and build on. And when you look at everything else that he has in his toolkit, it's a good foundation for a player to start with. And when you're taking a swing at potentially the 26th pick, that's exactly the type of guy you want to maybe take a swing on.
All right, Jackson, Rockets picked 3 times in the first round. We'll see what happens. Thanks, buddy, for joining me.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.